Hundreds of hours, late nights, blood, sweat, and tears. Built not bought, a dying breed.
Welcome back to your world. So, in this episode, I have to try and figure out how to get my container from the clearing in the forest down to the location by the house, at the back of the house, where I'm going to build the shed. Now, for that to happen, I have to go down the road, around the corner, and then down a fairly narrow lane by the side of our house to get to the location. Now, you might ask yourself, could I have got it delivered there with a HIAB that delivered the container? Well, the road isn't in great shape, and neither is the land for a crane to put out its outriggers and get it out to where I want the container. So I've come up with a better plan. I'm going to put some wheels and a drawbar on this container up in the clearing, and then we'll just drive it down the road and back it down the laneway. Simple, isn't it? Let's crack into it. So the first thing with any job like this is, obviously I spent a bit of time designing it, but write yourself out a cut list. So what I do is I write down all the different sizes and then all the different lengths to be cut, and it just makes life a bit easier. So, or even in your kind of gathering phase, which I'm going to show you next, where you have to go and find the stuff. So do up a full list and work from there. Typical look, and I got the combi lift about 20 metres outside the shed. It stopped. So luckily there's a second part of steel, and I went off in my gathering phase with that one. So I've been told anything down the bottom yard is free game, so let's go scavenging and see what I can find. So first piece up is a big piece of channel. I think it's 200 by 90, and that's gonna cut that kind of in half at an angle that'll form the drawbar. So measure once, cut twice, and then cut the angle we want the drawbar. At this point here, I realised that the roller guide for the blade has to be widened out, otherwise it's going to hit into the channel and the saw is going to stop and there'll be no cutting. So even though this is a monster saw, it can cut small stuff and big stuff. And part of the challenge here of such a long cut is what you do with the coolant. So on the rag to provide a bit of a dam, and yeah, just keep going. Sometimes the headphones, probably the two Johnnies, so I'm probably laughing away while I'm doing all this cutting. So this box section is going to be one of the uprights at the back of the container, and while that's cutting, I'm lining up a big heavy piece of channel with the forklift, getting that ready for cutting. Okay, I'm going to do a little tip here for when you're trying to cut angles on the bandsaw. So we want to cut one that's got two angles meeting with each other, and oftentimes it can be hard to sight the saw where your cut is going to be. But these saws are set up so that the pivot point is exactly where the blade meets the back of the stop here. So our length that we want is 805. So if I measure 805 here, with the blade square out to the edge of the work. Okay, and then I want to set my angle. Simply move the saw afterwards to the angle I want. And start with my saw, and we'll check that after. That's going to be the right one. So, are we right? So, spare tape on there. Here we have it. 805, spot on. Okay, next on the shopping list, I need an axle. To be honest, this is half the reason I had this idea, is that I had the axle and the wheels lying around from a project that never really got off the ground. If I hadn't this axle, I probably wouldn't have gone down this road. But you'll see here from the undergrowth and all the stuff that was piled on top of it, the axle's been around for a while, but it's brand new. Okay, some big items here, so working on a bench wasn't really an option. So the idea is that the big channel there is going to act like a shoe on the very bottom of the container. I'm setting everything up on the two box sections there that are going to form the uprights just to raise the axle up off the ground. And those two pieces then, two short pieces, are spacing out the axle from the back of the container. Where I'm kneeling there now, that's where the container is going to be. And the axle has to be set back to allow for the tires themselves. So lots of measuring and messing around. You might be thinking, well, if you're never going to use this axle for anything else again, why are you going to so much trouble? Well, number one, I definitely don't want it falling off the container on the side of the road. And number two, who knows, might even sell this afterwards, so might as well put a bit of effort into it to make sure it's done right. So here I'm adding in two little corner gussets to brace the frame where the axle meets those short pieces standing off in the back of the container. Again, just for strength and to make sure there's no wobble or things don't fall off. I have made things that have fallen apart before because I was making something quick and nasty, and not this time. So with the axle welded up to the frame there, the next step is the two uprights that are going to go at the back of the container, and I've got some fittings on this box section so I can clamp the whole axle assembly to the back of the container, and I'm using the corner blocks on the container for that. So far easier to fabricate this on a bench and then add it to the axle that I've already put together. So I made 2 of those legs, and now I have to put the axle and angle in the orientation I wanted to add the legs. It's always tricky working on your own in the workshop, but it's made a bit easier with a forklift. However, as well as lifting heavy things, it can do a lot of damage in a very quick amount of time. So you got to be careful. But you know, that just adds to the fun. So getting the whole thing set up to weld now, using lots of spacers to have my legs in the right position. A lot of messing and fiddling and measuring and squaring, but that's just fabrication for you. And what I find time and time again is the time you put into the prep, it always pays back with the quality of the job. If you don't put in the prep, it's going to be shite. Okay, I'm at that point now where I'm ready to check is everything square. So, probably said it before, the easiest way to do this is to measure your diagonals. If both diagonals are the same, the item is square. If they're not, it's not square. And that's probably me there giving it the boot to push it in the right direction. So once it's square, the only other thing I'm worried about is everything parallel? Is the ground underneath good enough? So lie down, squint along it, and see that it is. Once I'm happy that it's square and that everything is aligned, then I can really go to town and weld everything up. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. So trying to spread out my welds a small bit to prevent any warpage, but it's not too bad on a structure like this. It's so heavy, warping shouldn't be a problem. There's an old phrase in the welding world, welders get to do it in all positions. Well, that was one of these jobs. So the next little job was to make up the hooks that are going to secure the frame to the lifting blocks on either corner of the container. So it's been a threaded bar with a folded flat in the end. Okay, so it's the morning after the workshop. build of this frame, which if you look at it from a certain angle, you'd have to say, with its two arms out in front, it looks like an ass cart. Yeah, I've made a very, very heavy ass cart. So today we're going to lift up the back end of the container. We're going to use these two girders then to prop up the end of it, and then hopefully just lift this in place and use the hooks to secure it on. I had an instant drive home last night. I'll put up a video of that later on, because the trailer is about 2.1 meters, but the container and the frame are 2.5, so nice bit of overhang there. My strapping seemed to have worked. So strapping, from a lifetime of experience of things falling off the trailer. So what I have is I have two opposing straps kind of keeping the frame in place. Then I have a piece of channel here to support the open ends of the frame, because otherwise they just fall on the road, and that has its own strap, and then the excess of that is double back to keep that in place. So yeah, she rattled along the Galway Nurse Common roads and didn't move, so that's a win. Okay, so we're at the clearing in the forest and trying to get the chains and ladders out, start moving things around the place, and see if this frame is going to fit. So job number one is to lift the container up and put something underneath to allow frame to get slid underneath where that angle is on the bottom. At this point, I know I should have moved that wooden ladder, and that will come back to haunt me, but luckily the ladder will just escape. So after rescuing the ladder from certain death, it's time to move around the chains and try and get this frame hanging the way I want it, so it will nicely, just snugly, go in the back of the container. Okay, so a bit of a disaster this morning. So I was lifting the wrist back up. I hit the I was going down, pushed it to its extent, and unfortunately there was a weak point in the hose. Oil sprayed everywhere. So I've got a new hose made up, and we'll stick that back on. I have a slightly different plan for lifting the container. So the problem was that I was running out of height because the bucket was on, and I didn't particularly know how to use the quick hitch in this model, but I think I've that figured out now. But either way, even with the bucket still on, I have a plan. So first of all, fit on this new pipe. So now I've got two green slings that are extending the chains for me so that the bucket can be up above the container. And just like that, it went in like a glove. What I mean to say is, eventually, it went on like a glove. Okay, so it's some good and some bad. So one good thing is, it's actually, the frame is taking the weight of the container there now. It's actually an inch or two off the ground, albeit hung from the digger there. But I made a bit of a miscalculation. So my threaded bars aren't long enough, and also my hooks are probably a bit big, so they're quite hard to rotate in there. But I'll be honest with you, I still have to go in and make the drawbar and fit that. So I'm taking this as a bit of a win, you know. Okay, small bit of adaptation to do, but in general, it's on there and it will clamp into place. So we'll take the wins where we can get them, for sure. Okay, so back in the workshop, and I've redesigned the hook system for connecting the frame onto the container. So the problem was that I couldn't get the finger part into the hole of the container because there wasn't enough room to rotate it. So I've made two separate parts. So I've welded the nut onto the piece of flat that's folded, and then threaded bar can simply thread into that, and then I can use this nut to tighten the whole thing back. And I'm working on the drawbar for the container as well. So it's going to have an outrigger here and here. Well, not there, actually 1200 in there and there, and then back here. Then I'm going to close off the back with this big piece of angle. I'm going to put 3 holes in it, and then they'll bolt into the cross member. But I fucked up. So I showed you the cool trick or the hack for when you're cutting angles, but I forgot that when you want two things to be opposite to each other, you have to also flip them around the saw. So I didn't do that, so I had to cut the front again, and I now have to make up a piece to stick in here, and I give myself a nice bit of welding to do. But sure, hey, could be worse. It's nice heavy stuff, so it'll take a good weld. Okay, and then tomorrow we're back at the container again. So that short piece of angle that's going to go at the back of the drawbar, I'm drilling that on the milling machine here. And I'm using what they call an annular cutter attachment. Something I bought a long time ago. Actually something we might put on the new website. So if people want one, they can be supplied for milling machines or for pillar drills, but they're excellent for putting mag drill cutters into a drill. And you can drill big holes without, using small bits and working your way up to a big hole. So back at the drawbar again now. I have to cut a cap that's going to cap the end of the drawbar and encapsulate the drawing eye. So safety squints on. So I'm mounting the drawing eye, which is an off-the-shelf item, to the drawbar. Now, some people will put it in the bottom of the drawbar, and the argument would be that you can always cut it off and put on a new one when it gets worn. I don't know, I just think this is a better job. Yeah, is it going to make it harder to replace in time? But it's going to be good and strong, and it's going to look well. So that gets my vote. So when you're working with what they call the hot wrench, tolerances aren't always high, so there's always kind of last minute adjustments to be made. So it's time to get the fire back. It's always a good idea to get rid of any hot molten metal, because stepping on it and your boots don't always go well together. Okay, so we're back at the container, and our the Mark II clamping setup is just nice, and we're ready to put on some wheels. So let's do that. So when I plan all these mad activities, I work at the speed of this video, which is about 7 times normal speed. Unfortunately, living through it is not quite as easy. There's some great things about living in the countryside like this. You just couldn't make that up. I should have said this earlier, but I am not a digger driver. I am not a digger operator. I am absolutely fucking around till I find out here. So if you're going to comment on my skills, don't even bother. So eventually I got the drawbar underneath the container. Now I just got to lift it up into place, tighten the bolts, and then lift up the container a bit so I can get underneath to mark the back of the drawbar. Just a little more nudgy nudgy to get it into the right place. Okay, so that's the drawbar fitted and tightened against the corner blocks of the container. But now I've got to secure the back of it. So I'm going to do that with that angle we drilled in the milling machine. And then there's 3 holes to be marked and drilled in the long piece of channel with my trusty piece of chalk. So this being a clearing in the forest, there is no place to plug in a mag drill, and it was easier to bring the channel to the workshop than trying to bring a generator out. So back in the trailer, throw up the channel, down to the workshop, drill some holes. Okay, so that's a wrap for the episode. Went from start to finish making an axle and a frame to get this container rolling. So it's bolted on the back with our 4 bolts, 2 on that side and 2 on the far side. Up front then, built a fairly meaty drawbar, and again she's bolted left and right. There's a small bit of a gap here. I think that's only because the container's lifted at the moment. I'm happy enough with that. We're not exactly we're not going driving to China or anything. And underneath then, so I've got a channel iron that goes into one of the 2 pockets for the large forklift. That's tensioned off the corner block with a ratchet strap, same on the far side. And then underneath we've got our drawbar, come back to 3 bolts there. So hopefully the tractor can move it, and we'll have fun getting it down the laneway and into position. But she's mobile now, so see you next time.